Hey YouTube, Joeboy here. So, One Piece chapter 1094 is out. If you guys haven't checked out that chapter yet, I suggest that you do so because I will be spoiling you. But now that you have, let's begin. Look man, at this point I don't even care how good the chapters are. It could be like an 8 out of 10, but it becomes a 10 out of 10 just on the sole fact that we don't have a break next week. I understand Oda's doing his own thing, he's busy, and we support him always, right? That is understood. At the same time, getting One Piece chapters also feels great. But it just so happens that this chapter was also a lot of gas. I just like that things are happening. I would say that reading the chapter, man, it went by so quickly just because it was all action. And when that action involves a character that has been hyped up for like 700 chapters, maybe we're finally getting something revealed that, I've been waiting for most of my adult life. That also feels great too. But yeah, where to even start here? I mean, I felt like just a few chapters prior, there was some level of organization. Like, the groups were separated. There was Luffy versus Kizaru up in the tower. Vegapunk was trying to unlock the code and break down the shields. And then it's like, hey, let's try to escape. Well, that's gone to shit. And it's crazy to think about why this happened, right? The impetus of everything, believe it or not, was Kizaru sending Bonnie through the shield. She lands in the center of absolute carnage, and Vegapunk follows her. And because Vegapunk follows her, everyone else follows her as well. Kizaru versus Luffy, which was previously separated, has now been brought to the center of everything because Kizaru is also trying to murder Vegapunk. And I guess just, good lord, man, it's insanity. But yeah, this is going to be a weird chapter review just because I have two videos already recorded, mostly edited, that are very interrelated to things that we got in this chapter. So on one hand, I kind of want to be careful when talking about this. But on the other hand, these videos happen to be insanely on point with the discussion material from this chapter. So I guess we'll just play it by ear. Most of what I have to say about Kizaru has not changed. Look guys, we've been following this Luffy-Kizaru fight. Kizaru is a boss. He is incredibly powerful. But I have the same lingering feeling like Kizaru really has not accomplished anything. Not really. And frankly, this is exactly what we speculated from the start. Does this mean that Kizaru will conclude this arc having done nothing? No, I wouldn't even speculate that. I don't believe that. But certainly is Kizaru actually fighting for something that he wants? No, he does not want to kill Vegapunk. Is this in some way affecting his efficacy? Performing his role as an admiral? I really think so. He's very powerful, and I think Oda has done a great job of conveying that. At the same time, he's just a nuisance. But honestly, at this point, I think that Luffy has been exposed. I just called Kizaru a nuisance, right? And being a nuisance is enough to really test the Straw Hats and test Luffy. I know I'm going to get so much hate for saying that. But the time constraints of Luffy's abilities are a problem. At this point, I think that it's fair to define Luffy as a glass cannon. While we've progressed so much since Dressrosa and when Oda unveiled Gear 4th, at the same time, not that much has changed. When Luffy is really pressed and he is forced to use his strongest abilities, he's got to win very quickly. Or somebody's got to save him in the middle in some way. Because he's got to spend periods of time practically useless. Now this may come off as me being irritated or mad, but Luffy being the strongest is not something that's important to me. Honestly, there's two kinds of fights that I enjoy from Luffy. Either Luffy is by far stronger than his opponent and makes him look like a fool very quickly. Think like Luffy versus Bellamy. Or Luffy is the underdog and because of his willpower has to surpass his opponent. This idea of Luffy as a Yonko who is just on a tier above essentially everybody else constantly through the battle just sounds boring to me. So I honestly think the dynamic power scaling of Luffy is essential for the story, and ultimately what Oda has created is the ability to tap into the two versions of the fights that I like with Luffy simultaneously. He can power up and make someone look like a fool literally. But then that power takes its toll, makes Luffy weaker, and then you get the underdog returns. So yeah, honestly, I'm all about it. I really just probably wouldn't care too much for the toxic discussion that surrounds this. I think my opinion is that Luffy in Gear 5th is potentially the strongest character in the universe. If that's not true, it's very close to being true. I think Luffy in Gear 5th is stronger than Kizaru. Eventually, he would win. But just like the circumstances in Whole Cake Island where Luffy had to fight Cracker, there are certain abilities which counter him. And these are abilities which allow fighters to last and not get quickly bodied. And Kizaru has an ability like this. Even though he finally got kicked in the end, and I'm curious to see the level of damage that Luffy was able to inflict on him. Honestly, I think that Kizaru is going to get up from this injured, but I do think he's going to get back up. But with his speed alone, he was able to time Luffy out, which in an arc and in a battlefield which consists of many other opponents, that is a huge problem. All this serves the purpose of reminding me that base Luffy is important, right? We are not led to believe that Goldie Roger had a devil fruit. Shanks does not appear to have a devil fruit. Garp does not have a devil fruit. But all of these characters, Rayleigh, were top tiers, or are top tiers. Some of the strongest people to probably have ever lived, and at the very top of their generations. So Luffy is cheating at least a little bit with his devil fruit. And whether it's been required or not, I think that you can say that he's too reliant on it. Or that it has at least in part acted to elevate him beyond where he would be without it. There's going to come a time in the EOS, in the end of story, where Luffy is fighting Blackbeard, and Blackbeard's going to be able to nullify Luffy's devil fruit, and Luffy will simply have to be strong enough without it. Every time, man, I just get this brutal imagery in my mind of Luffy going Gear 4th, Blackbeard touching him, and because suddenly Luffy is not made out of rubber, he practically implodes or explodes. The devil fruit in my mind should be last resort, like Luffy is equal to practically everyone in the universe in base form alone, and then he pulls out the devil fruit to give him the extra juice he needs to finish the fight. So yeah, once again, I like this dynamic. You know, it leaves Luffy still, even as a Yonko, room to grow, which is part of the fun of the adventure. Becoming too strong too soon, I don't think works narratively. And Oda's managed to balance it by making Luffy god tier only for a certain amount of time. And otherwise, he gets an assist from the friends he made along the way. Like when Law was carrying him around Dressrosa after Gear 4th originally ran out and Doflamingo was not defeated. But anyway, Gear 5th having a time limit is something that, you know, when I thought of awakenings before Gear 5th, I didn't think that they would be limited by time. But clearly that's the case, and we should really be thinking about the toll that this power is taking on his body. Is this ability killing him? Like every time Luffy withers away and transforms into an old man, this thought occurs to me. I know that fans are a million miles away from old 2010 speculations that Luffy is going to come up with a Gold Roger incurable disease. You guys remember all the way back in Gear 2nd, where it was revealed that, hey, anytime he uses this ability, he loses lifespan. A lot of people have forgotten about this, but it's still on my mind. But anyway, I don't want to move on from Kizaru just yet. I just want to acknowledge that, you know, I think that this man should be a lot more powerful than he has demonstrated. The lack of fighting for what he desires matters, and we haven't even seen his awakening yet. I'll be honest with you guys, I try not to be disappointed by anything, but if we don't see Kizaru's awakening in this arc, if he doesn't use it, or if he doesn't possess it, I might legitimately be disappointed. At the very least, I want some sort of explanation. I want to understand it better. Like, this guy has had his fruit for a very long time as a top tier character. We've seen, probably it's true, Akainu and Aokiji both possess awakenings. Why wouldn't Kizaru? That's just something that I either need to see or I need an explanation for why. This is one aspect of One Piece right now that I would say that I'm not enjoying, because I don't want the Hunter x Hunter experience. I don't want the Jujutsu Kaisen experience where fights are happening and then everything's sort of being explained in words after the chapter's over. Or somehow in the middle of the chapter a little bit too much dialogue. This is my move explained before or after I've used it. Sorry if that offends you. But at the same time, almost a contradiction of everything that I just said is, you know, like, I want to understand the One Piece fights as they're happening. And sometimes I feel like I don't. But in One Piece, it's less about the specific moves that are being used, because they're, generally speaking, punch, kick, sort of, you know, you don't need an explanation. It's not overly complex. But, like, when it comes to awakenings, why some characters have them, why some characters don't, certain versions of hockey, you're kind of left really at the mercy of whatever Oda has already decided, and then you figure it out after the fact. It's just a different experience. With awakenings, we don't even know precisely the circumstances which lead to them, but if Kizaru does not possess it, do we begin to speculate like Kizaru does not embody the fruit? What would those qualities be? But either way, it's really difficult to create expectations going into the fight, and expectations drive excitement. Should I be excited for Kizaru's awakening or not? It's kind of the fundamental problem. But if this man has his own awakening in his back pocket and has not used it yet, we should be scared. It almost by itself makes Luffy look like a chump if this was true, just because, I mean, a lot of this comes down to if the awakening has a time limit, who uses it first is probably at a disadvantage. But honestly, this is how I would characterize this chapter. Before now, man, it all felt really good. It felt like the strats were in control. It felt like there was an avenue for escape and they just had to deal with solvable problems. Suddenly, everyone is gathered around in the center of the chaos. You have an incredibly powerful character, Saturn Gorosei, with a mythical zone devil fruit. And potentially Kizaru is not done either. Now that Pacifista have flipped and you have essentially all the problems that you had before, with less ability to deal with them. One of the videos coming out is going to talk about the parallels between this arc and Sabaody, and this chapter, you know, honestly, I started recording that video before this chapter came out. This chapter really starts to solidify the feeling of like, wait a second. The tone of this arc has changed, in almost the exact same way that it occurred in Sabaody. Nobody thought that the strats were going to lose in Sabaody because the precedent of the entire story is that the strats always find a way to win. We went into Sabaody and it was relatively carefree. People wanted the strats to prove themselves. They were Supernova now, one of the most famous pirates to have conquered half of the Grand Line. We weren't taking anything seriously. Yes, the Gorosei or the Celestial Dragons are a problem. Don't punch them. Call an admiral. Admirals are scary, right? At the same time, if that happened, which is what I was actively rooting for at the time, it was like, well, if this does happen, they'll find a way. Little did we know that soon after this was utter defeat. I can promise you, not too many people at the time predicted that. If you had speculated it, you would have been largely laughed at. Likewise, this arc began mostly carefree. Luffy defeats Kaido. He is a Yonko now. There is nobody that he can't challenge. They don't have to be careful, and they don't have to worry about consequences. And this arc has been, in my opinion, treated largely like a joke, with very little tension. I am not saying that Egghead has not been great, but it's been a sequence of hype events, rather than any real concern that the strats were going to lose, or that we should really fear anything. But yeah, suddenly this impression has changed, all in basically one chapter. I still can't find it within me to predict that the strats lose like they did in Sabaody. You know, you can draw parallels between Sabaody. Again, an entire video, we're going to discuss a lot of things. But certainly the idea of defeat seems like it's worthy of talking about. And at the very least here, guys, I think that based on the context of the battle right now, the strats need support. They need allies. The Iron Giant could be a game changer. We haven't even seen this thing fight yet, so we truly have no idea other than this thing will probably do something. And of course, Blackbeard and the Blackbeard Pirates potentially being here creates chaos. Like Littlefinger says, chaos is a ladder. And once again, I would keep my eye on Kizaru. I'm seriously not attempting to put my foot in my mouth. I just think that it is a distinct possibility that Kizaru could flip sides. You just need the right circumstances in order to facilitate this. So of course we'll see. But at the very least, any amount of hesitancy could end up being very good for the strats. I think the strats need whatever they can get. But you know, the other half of the fun of reacting to One Piece Weekly is just being absurdly wrong, right? I am not immune to that. And so it'd also be cool to see a moment for the Strat Pirates, you know, the crew members. Everybody's here. This is potentially an opportunity for everyone to individually flex and really establish themselves as like, wait, this isn't just Luffy and Zoro as two monsters heading a crew of ragtag wannabes. You know, Nami and Frankie and Chopper and Brook and everybody has grown, such that they could individually down vice admirals like it's no big deal. Power scalers might flip out at the notion of this. I really have no idea. Power scaling is something that matters very little to me. It's really just like, what's happening, okay? And I presume that it makes sense. That's literally my mentality, because I just assume that Oda has an understanding of his universe better than I do. So I kind of just wait to see reveals based on what occurs. So do I think that the Straw Hats, like all the members, are all Vice Admiral level now? I mean, no, but maybe, you know, and that maybe that's something that I'm missing in all of this to even the odds a little bit. It's not as bad as it seems because the Straw Hats as a collective pirate crew are so strong. And honestly, we should be asking some questions about Saturn. I know it's probably sacrilegious to speculate in any way that Saturn is not Yonko level or insanely top tier, but Bonnie was able to stab him relatively easily. Do I think he's dead? Absolutely freaking not. He is not in any way dead. He will return. Maybe he has healing powers. I just think that the act of allowing Bonnie to do that it's sus. Saturn, are you really that dude? Or are you a poser? Honestly, it seems very telegraphed that Saturn possesses the Ushi-Oni yokai mythical devil fruit. Actually, I first became familiar with Ushi-Oni from Yu-Gi-Oh! Back in the day. But the Ushi-Oni is a yokai with normally a bull's head and then a spider-like body. There's also another version of this from Naruto with Killer Bee. Killer Bee was one of my favorite characters from Naruto, by the way. But his tailed beast was the Ushi-Oni, but they substituted the spider legs for octopus legs. Anyway, Saturn arrived with a lot of flash, and his devil fruit alone, being a mythical zone by itself, would make him very strong. But there's a difference between being a guy with a very strong devil fruit and being a top tier. And it all comes down to hockey, basically. So when Saturn emerges from a pentacle, there's a number 5 on it, which is curious by itself. 5 Gorosei. Is this the numeral, the number associated with Saturn? And does this have anything to do with his devil fruit or not? It feels like it's almost technology rather than something that's a part of his fruit. Certainly the visual of it is unusual. But he shows up and it's revealed that anybody who is below Vice Admiral or Rear Admiral can't look at him. And one dude clearly was not listening, decided to look at him, and his head exploded. I initially thought that this might be a hockey feat. And in my mind, this sort of solidified Saturn as, okay, definitely top tier. Exploding people's heads with hockey is definitely something I consider to be noteworthy. But then I read some lore of the Ushi-Oni, and this could in fact be simply a power of his devil fruit. That's what defines mythical zones, right? Why are mythical zones special? Well, first off, you represent a mythical creature, but second off, you get some sort of paramecia or logia type ability as well. Marco's flames and healing as one example among many, but it's basically a zone with some magical powers attached to it. And I think that this devil fruit's powers might literally be to kill people that look at him. This is what I read. According to a legend, if a hiker stumbles across an Ushi-Oni in the forest and their eyes meet, the Ushi-Oni will drain the person's soul. In Japanese, this is called Kage wo ku, or Kage wo nomu, meaning to eat the shadow or to catch the soul. This is straight up similar enough for me to believe that the power that we saw in this chapter is a product of the devil fruit. But what this simultaneously accomplishes, it makes me wonder about Saturn's level of hockey. And getting stabbed by Bonnie is not a good start. It's not a great first impression. That's just kind of where I'm sitting right now. At the very least, I think that you guys have to admit that that was a pretty shocking ending, was it not? The red carpet unveils itself, Saturn appears in all his glory, and then at the very end of the same chapter, gets shanked by Bonnie of all people with a sword. Very weird. But to make sure that we clarify here, the reason why only Rear Admirals and above can look at Saturn is I think that hockey can interfere with devil fruit abilities. So basically, Saturn's special ability here of exploding people only works on the insanely weak, which is honestly how it should be because the power would be too broken otherwise. But yeah, essentially what we're asking is whether or not Saturn is all flash and no gas. I'm not saying that my opinion is completely formed, but the question has occurred to me. Even if you were to dissect the pentacle, it's a weird thing. This is not something that is usual of devil fruits. It feels like part of an act, a charade. Saturn's making a show, trying to be intimidating. But frankly, intimidating people don't need to act that way, they just are. But I understand that the discussion, most people's discussion, is going to be very different from what I've laid out here, just because the Gorosei Saturn is insanely hyped, and not a lot of people are going to want to believe that he is a poser. And I get it, is it right for a character like this to be less powerful? A lot of people will say that is disappointing. But I've just been conditioned over the years that when I think that Oda is going to zig, he might zag, and vice versa, right? So you never really know. That dude exists in another universe entirely. I think that realistically, Saturn probably has not participated in many battles over the course of his life. I am assuming that he is mortal and has lived a mortal life. Without the accumulated experience of battle, I don't understand how somebody would become a top tier, even if they possessed a top tier devil fruit. In fact, the devil fruit itself could be a handicap. It is so powerful that Saturn has never had to try in any battle that he might have actually had. He would literally need to fight characters on the tier of Whitebeard and Kaido, these sorts of powerful entities, in order to rely on something other than his fruit. So potentially this is some sort of justification for what we're actually observing in the chapter. But anyway, let's slowly back away from this conversation because I know that it irritates a lot of people. I'm going to get a bunch of dislikes for even suggesting this. But, you know, I'm also really excited for Saturn. And I'm not saying that we've seen everything that he can do. There's other lore about the Ushi Oni, for instance, relating to toxicity or poison, which could be really fitting as well. I mean, the dude is half spider, so some sort of venom. That would be interesting. And also it would have fascinating interactions with Luffy specifically, because at this point he's immune to most toxins. But anyway guys, things are really progressing right now. I felt like this chapter really moved the story along, and so, you know, a lot of these things could come to a head relatively quickly. I'm excited to see how the strats deal with the current circumstances, what happens. There's so much potential and hype right now, undoubtedly. I think that at least for the next chapter, or maybe the next couple chapters, it could start to feel bad. I really think that Vegapunk's minutes are numbered. And I feel like we're going to have wild twist after twist all the way from now until the end. But of course, as always is the case, we'll see. But you guys already know the drill, right? I read the chapter, you read the chapter. If you noticed anything that I might have missed or just have thoughts to share, leave them in the comment section below. The Booms Volume 3 is now officially out. I'm so excited for people to be able to read this because I think the end is incredible. And if you guys happen to read it, just let me know what you think about it, leave a review. Just as the case with my chapter reviews or my theories, you're welcome to disagree. But you gotta state your reasons. But yeah guys, like the video, subscribe, click the bell to be notified, join the squad. And as always, have a wonderful day.